Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today. Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about a few current affairs programs I've seen that talk about how Scandinavia, and they focus on Denmark, how the Danish government is effectively reversing their view on mass immigration and integration, cultural diversity, and multiculturalism, and so on. And now Denmark is supposedly one of the first countries that started bringing in third world peasants, a lot of them Muslims, that sort of thing, and they found that the integration rate is very low, assimilation rate is very low, and there's very high resistance amongst these people, these immigrants that they brought in from the third world. There's very high resistance to even wanting to integrate or making any effort to integrate. All efforts are providing free Danish language schools, quite active promotional campaigns. So look, it's all free. To go and learn Danish. We'll even provide transport for you to get there. We'll even give you a meal when you get there. Every incentive and inducement that's offered, and yet these people, some exceptions obviously, are not interested. So the Danish government has come out with really, it's a statement of the obvious, that the idea that this could be considered radical in any way or extreme is hard to imagine. But they're saying, look, these people, the government's made really a rod for their own back in some ways. They gave temporary housing to these supposed refugees and illegals who are allowed to stay, that sort of thing. And some people arriving even legally. They gave government housing, so they gave entire blocks of apartments where only Muslims from the Middle East or African blacks were put. So they'd put them in areas so they'd have each other as moral support and that sort of stuff. And this was meant to be temporary. You can stay there for 6 months while you get yourself together. But instead, these groups were organised and did organise very quickly to make sure that the handouts were infinite and endless. There were a lot of bleeding hearts in the then Danish social welfare system. So we can't turn these people out on the street. We can't send them back where they came from. We just have to keep on giving them free accommodation and free everything. And so these people thought, well, wow, if you're going to just hand out things like that, well, why should I bother doing any? So these ghettos formed. The ghettos became centres of crime and drug dealing, and the rival gangs would then form amongst those people. They'd have shootouts in the street and so on and so forth. So it didn't really work. Now, at any one time, between 45 and 55% of these diverse ones are unemployed, and the employment they do get is low paid and short term. Like maybe they get a job delivering pizzas for a few weeks or something like that. So there's a very low employment rate, and again, they tend to get jobs where English isn't, or the local language isn't really an issue. So, but I just wanted to go through some of it. Now I'm going to really sort of focus on one of these current affairs documentary type ones. Now it's a left-leaning and an outfit that's very sympathetic to mass migration, but they're trying very hard to be balanced while at the same time being ideologically sympathetic. So now they couch accepting illegals and accepting refugees, like this is third world peasants, into a first world, very regulated economy. That these people are going to be, the Danish government was welcoming, generous and tolerant. So that's when you accept illiterate peasants in large numbers. So clearly they're on side with that, but not wanting illiterate peasants, large numbers of illiterate peasants coming into your country. They couch that as extreme, this is using their words out of the documentary, extreme, radical, hostile, inhumane, for goodness sakes, racist, I can't miss that one, intolerant and exclusionary. So all the globalist cabal talking points, how they denigrate anybody that doesn't agree with mass migration. Now, the same piece here concedes that illiterate peasants who are illiterate in their own language, who have no job skills, no nothing, will consume a lot of welfare. They do concede that. They even concede that these people are resistant to speaking either English or Danish. They concede that people won't work because of the generosity of the welfare system. They even concede they commit crimes. They concede that they're heavily involved in the black market and in drug dealing. They even concede that these people create parallel societies by their refusal to integrate. They not happily, but they do softly and gently concede that. They move past it pretty quickly because they obviously don't want to dwell on it. Now, they quickly jump on and say, well, all the people that arrived temporarily on short-term visas from, say, the Ukraine during the war, those people were, they allege, welcomed more warmly than the others, the brown and the black people were. That's certainly an opinion they put there. I'm not sure I agree with it, but nonetheless. Now, quite a few of these Ukrainians spoke passable English. I mean, that may help. But anyway, the Ukrainians were only staying temporarily. They were only there for a certain period of time. They weren't coming to stay, coming to live, or anything like that. So the temporary assistance they got is fair enough. Whereas the supposed refugees from brown and black refugees or alleged refugees decided to stay and become citizens and this sort of thing, or apply for citizenship. So they had no intention of going back. So the Danish government said, well, look, if you don't integrate, if you won't assimilate, and the country you came from that maybe was in danger, it was like a civil war or something, then we're going to return you there and we'll pay for you to go back. We'll give you the plane ticket for free, but you have to go. And if you refuse to go, then we'll put you in a welfare paid hostel, I suppose you'd call it, where they have to stay there every night and every weekend. But the Danish government's also done other things which you see elsewhere now around Scandinavia, Sweden and so on, where if you claim to be a refugee and you can't afford to work, or you won't work, but you can afford to go on a holiday back to your country of origin where you claim your life's in so much danger you can't return there, then all benefits are suspended that you may get, and equally you're going to have to return to that place. If you go there on vacation, then you can go back there to live. This idea that it's too dangerous and you can't go back, but you go back there for a holiday. So they're really closing up a lot of the rorts that go on there. So if you don't speak in Danish after a certain amount of time, and we offer you free classes and you don't even bother attending, then we're going to say you don't want to integrate, and we're going to again ask you to leave. And so this particular article was borderline outraged by this, that these people were being invited to leave or asked to leave the country. Again, they get a free plane ticket back to where they came from. But if you're going to stay in our country, Denmark, you have to make every effort to integrate, which includes learning a language, going to school, and acquiring usable skills, employable skills. This article did concede that the take-up rate on that wasn't high, but they still suggested, look, it's really harsh to hold these people to the same standard you would hold white people, and they're not prepared to concede that importing masses of third world illiterate peasants, illiterate in their own language, is a good thing. That they think, well, it's a good thing. It's generous, it's welcoming, it's tolerant, it's gender studies, beautiful, and it's this, but that they won't accept that it's wrong in itself. And whilst they accept there are problems, they say, well, you're a rich country, you should accept these problems. They're poor people from a poorer country, therefore you are obligated to spend the wealth your rich country has created. Now, they do concede, a bit reluctantly, concede that you can't have high immigration with low integration and then also have generous welfare. They say the three don't go together. So, and they do concede that taxes have to be increased if you're going to accept a large number or any number of migrants in. If you're going to accept a large number of refugees, migrants, who are illiterate third world peasants who want to live completely different lifestyles and are ready, you refuse point blank effectively to integrate. Now, they won't ask the question, well, why come to a country where you don't want to integrate? You absolutely point blank refuse to integrate or assimilate. Why do you want to come to such a country, then complain that you're experiencing alleged racism? They don't seem to want to go down that path, but they do concede that non-integration and non-assimilation means higher taxes. And they're not prepared to concede that white people therefore suffer, because if it's all white people who are all working with very low unemployment, high levels of education, that sort of thing, then the social welfare system is directed at those who are ill, incapable, or senior citizens, that sort of thing, and that's affordable. But as soon as you get working age people and large numbers of them, and you get a free house, you get free everything, then it gets much harder to sustain the welfare state. But they're arguing, well, that's kind of the white man's burden. You've got a rich country, so you should do this. You must do this. You have to do this. To not do it is to not give endless amounts of money to illiterate peasants that don't want to integrate. To not do that is extreme, it's radical, it's hostile, it's inhumane, it's racist, it's intolerant, and it's exclusionary. So they still stick to the globalist talking point propaganda position, even though they do concede some of the challenges. Now, what they seem mostly concerned with, that is this the beginning of the end of mass migration? Is this the white Western countries finally waking up and realizing none of this is working? We should never have done it in the first place. It was always some crazy fantasy Marxist bullshit dream at the outset. Exactly how are you going to integrate illiterate third world peasants, low IQ peasants? How are you going to integrate them? And if you're not going to do it under, if you're going to just keep on giving them endless free stuff, then what's the incentive for them to do it? Now, the documentary did concede, to some extent, that. Say, well, as long as the white West, the rich white West, has all these welfare benefits, which were designed and constructed in very different times with a very different mix of people who want to access it. If the West does have these things, then it's the West's own fault. Because that's going to end up as a pull factor, which is going to encourage third world peasants and all the United Nations and NGO agitators say, hey, guess what? Illiterate rural peasant in a mud hut, you can go to that country there and they'll give you free house, free this, electricity, running water, flushing toilet, everything, all for free. Why wouldn't you go? So they're arguing, well, it's the fault of the West. If the West didn't have this welfare system, then these people wouldn't want to come. That's hardly the material point, but that's among the arguments they make. So they seem to think mass migration should stay, that it just should be some minor fine tuning is all that's needed, and it'll be good to go. And the mass migration, illiterate peasants, and so on. They also have the Marxist view, that well, these poor illiterate peasants, why shouldn't they go to a rich country? Why should they be denied going to a rich country? Why should they have to go to another poor country? They're entitled to come, but they want to come to a rich country. They're poor. They want these things. Why can't they? And to deny them that means you're a racist fucking Nazi. So they still cling to that view, but and they seem to be certainly very worried about the changes in attitudes. They held Scandinavia generally up, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Finland. They held that up as being the most successful social welfare states in the world. And because they're social welfare states, they have this idea, this sort of semi-Marxist idea of sharing and equal outcomes and this sort of thing, and that is somewhat in the the cultural attitude of that part of the world, but not equal outcomes to the point where you do nothing, contribute nothing, put nothing on the table, but expect an equal outcome. with someone else. So the globalists, sort of, certainly the foot soldiers that push the refugee end of the mass migration, have this hold on to this childlike fantasy view that all outcomes should be equal, regardless of what you do. And going back again to the Marxist idea of, and you saw this in the sort of conceptually, at least in the Soviet Union, was that if you're capable of hard work and capable of high-level intellectual work and capable of all those things, then you should share whatever you produce because you're more capable. Because you're more capable than someone who's less capable, just because they're less capable doesn't mean they should have less than you. The outcome should be equal, and you, the one that produces a lot of units of output, if you like, you that produces that should share what you have with someone who produces a lot less. So you both put them together, so you both have an equal amount, and you should be pleased to share your hard work or the benefits and outcome of your hard work with someone who does nothing. Then that's an equal society in that sort of Marxist view. And this is how much the starry-eyed sort of observers saw Scandinavia in that way, when it wasn't really in that way. It wasn't that way at all. Sure, the social benefits were generous, but the assumption was that very few people would access them. And at certain stages of their life or in certain circumstances. So taxes were overall, fairly high in order to fund this welfare state. But then, a lot of people are prepared to pay the higher taxes, knowing that their friend, their neighbour, their mother, their father, their brother or sister are the beneficiaries. When the beneficiaries are freeloaders, illiterate peasants in the third world that hate your country and hate you and hate your culture and everything like that, then why would you want to share with them when you have to pay a lot of extra tax for it? So there's a lot of inbuilt things that are going to cause it mass migration to come apart. But the main concern the article wasn't in making in say selecting better quality migrants or refugees. It wasn't anything like that. It was still, the idea was still that wow, we've got to really look out here and make sure that Denmark or the way that the Danish government wants to handle this doesn't spread to other countries. Mass migration must continue. Refugees must continue and into the white countries. And the fact that they're illiterate peasants and everything is irrelevant. That just shows how much they need the handouts. That's the view, at least expressed. But it's interesting to see the beginnings of panic here, that the whole mass migration globalist project is maybe about to turn around, and I hope it does. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.